I watched the Dark Lord panic. Sauron, the master of deception, the being who had dominated kings and corrupted kingdoms for thousands of years, the force that had broken the wills of the mightiest warriors in Middle-earth. I watched him lose control, watched him make mistakes, watched him destroy himself through fear, and I realized something that haunts me still, something that I didn't understand until it was too late, until Mount Doom erupted, until the Dark Tower fell, until everything we built, everything we believed, everything we served, crumbled into ash and ruin. That fear, that panic, that loss of control, it was his greatest mistake, the error that cost him everything, the weakness that destroyed him more completely than any army, any sword, any power in Middle-earth. My name is Malthor. I was a lieutenant in Barad-dûr, the Dark Tower, Sauron's fortress. I served him for 40 years, rose through the ranks, commanded men, oversaw operations, stood in his presence and received his orders. I knew him, as much as any mortal could know a being like that, a Maya, a spirit of power older than the world itself. And I had never, not once, in 40 years, seen him afraid, until Aragorn, until the palantír, until the night everything changed, the night Sauron saw something that terrified him so completely he abandoned all strategy, all patience, all the careful planning that had served him for millennia. He panicked, and that panic led him to make the mistake that destroyed him, that gave the West the opening they needed, that let a hobbit walk into Mordor and destroy the ring while Sauron's attention was focused elsewhere, on the wrong enemy, on the wrong threat. This is what happened. This is how Aragorn, son of Arathorn, heir of Isildur, tricked the Dark Lord, made him believe something that wasn't true, drew all his attention, all his forces, all his malice to the wrong place, at the wrong time, for the wrong reason. This is how one man's gamble, one incredibly dangerous risk, one moment of breathtaking courage, saved Middle-earth by making Sauron panic. Listen carefully, because this isn't a story about armies or battles or the clash of powers. This is a story about fear, about what happens when you make evil afraid, when you corner it, when you force it to react instead of plan, when you make it believe something so terrifying that it abandons everything else, when you make Sauron panic. He makes mistakes, fatal mistakes, mistakes that cost him everything. Before I tell you what happened that night, before I describe the panic, the terror, the complete loss of control that I witnessed, you need to understand what Sauron was like before, what he had always been, how he operated, how he thought, how he planned, how he won. Because the change, the transformation from that to what I saw after Aragorn, it was so complete, so shocking, so utterly unprecedented, that it proves just how terrified he was, how completely Aragorn had shaken him, how deeply that fear had penetrated. I had served Sauron for 40 years, started as a common soldier, rose through the ranks, proved myself useful, reliable, intelligent enough to manage complex operations, but not ambitious enough to be threatening. That's how you survived in Barad-dûr. You served. You obeyed. You made yourself valuable without making yourself a rival, without drawing too much attention, without giving Sauron any reason to question your loyalty. And in those 40 years, in thousands of interactions, in countless orders received and executed, in hundreds of councils and meetings and strategic discussions, I had learned how Sauron operated, how he thought, what made him dangerous, what made him successful, what made him seem inevitable, unstoppable, certain to win. He was patient, infinitely patient. He had existed for thousands of years, millennia beyond counting, had served Morgoth in the First Age when the world was young, had built kingdoms in the Second Age, had deceived the elves and forged the rings of power, had corrupted Numenor through decades of careful manipulation, decades of whispering in Ar-Pharazôn's ear, making him doubt, making him fear death, making him believe he could take immortality by force. And when Numenor fell, when the Valar themselves intervened and drowned the greatest kingdom of men beneath waves taller than mountains, Sauron had survived, his body destroyed, his fair form lost forever, but his spirit enduring, fleeing back to Mordor, rebuilding, replanning, starting over. That's what made him dangerous, not just his power, not just his malice, but his patience, his willingness to wait, to plan, to let strategies unfold over decades, over centuries, over whatever time it took to achieve his goals. He didn't rush, didn't react emotionally, didn't make decisions based on fear or anger or desperation. Everything was calculated, measured, part of long strategies that unfolded like elaborate mechanisms, each piece moving at the right time, in the right way, toward the inevitable conclusion he had foreseen. I had watched this, seen it, been part of it, for 40 years. Campaigns that took years to plan, deceptions that took decades to execute, strategies that required patience beyond human understanding. Wait for the right moment, position the pieces correctly, let the enemy make mistakes, then strike when victory was certain. And his presence, his will, the sheer force of his being, it was like standing before a mountain, immovable, unshakable, absolute. When he entered a room, when he spoke, when he gave orders, there was no doubt, no uncertainty, no question about whether his plan would work, whether his strategy was sound, whether victory was possible. It was certain as stone, as certain as the rising sun, as certain as death itself. You felt it in his presence, in the weight of his will pressing against your mind, making you understand, making you believe, making you know that following Sauron meant following inevitability, that his victory was as unstoppable as time, as inescapable as fate. He dominated through that certainty, through that absolute conviction. Men served him not just from fear of punishment, not just from corruption or promises of power, but from the genuine belief, the absolute conviction that he was going to win, that the West would fall, that resistance was futile, that even if you wanted to oppose him, even if some part of you remembered what you had been before, what you had believed, what you had valued, it didn't matter, because Sauron was inevitable. And fighting inevitability was insane. I believed it. We all believed it. Every servant in Barad-dûr, every commander in his armies, every corrupted king and dominated lieutenant and broken prisoner who had been remade into his tool. We all believed that Sauron's victory was certain, that it was just a matter of time, that the only question was whether we would be part of that victory, whether we would serve or whether we would be crushed beneath the wheels of inevitability like everyone else who had ever opposed him. Because in 40 years, in thousands of decisions, in countless plans and schemes and strategies, in wars and deceptions and manipulations beyond counting, I had never seen him wrong, never seen him surprised, never seen him uncertain, never seen him lose that absolute control over himself, his forces, his plans, his future, until the night with the palantír, until Aragorn, until everything changed. Let me tell you what I know now, what we learned later, after everything fell, after the survivors pieced together the truth from fragments and memories and the testimony of those who had been there. who had witnessed what Aragorn did, what he risked, what he showed Sauron that made the Dark Lord abandon everything. Aragorn took the palantír, one of the 7 seeing stones, ancient artifacts from Númenor, from the kingdom of men that had been drowned beneath the sea 3,000 years ago. The stones that allowed you to see across vast distances, to communicate with others who held them, to observe places far away, to coordinate armies, to spy on enemies, to know what was happening across Middle-earth without ever leaving your stronghold. Powerful tools, dangerous tools, tools that had been scattered when Númenor fell. 7 stones, some lost, some broken, some claimed by the kingdoms that Elendil's sons had founded in Middle-earth. Gondor held one in Minas Tirith, Saruman had possessed one in Orthanc, and Sauron. Sauron had dominated the stones, had made them his, had turned them from tools of seeing into tools of domination, of corruption, of breaking wills and turning enemies into servants. The palantír were supposed to be neutral, just stones, just windows that let you see. But Sauron had corrupted them, had poured his will into them, had made it so that anyone who looked into a seeing stone, anyone who tried to use them, they would face him, his presence, his overwhelming power pressing against their mind, breaking them, dominating them, making them serve. It had happened before, multiple times, with multiple victims. Denethor, the steward of Gondor, the ruler of the White City. He had looked into Minas Tirith's palantír, thinking he could use it to spy on Mordor, to gather intelligence, to learn Sauron's plans. But Sauron had been waiting, had let Denethor see, but only what Sauron wanted him to see. Only the armies, the strength, the inevitable victory. Only the truth, twisted just enough to drive Denethor to despair, to madness, to the belief that resistance was hopeless, that Gondor would fall, that everything he loved would be destroyed, and Saruman, the wizard, the leader of the Astari, the one who was supposed to organize resistance against Sauron. He had used Orthanc's stone, had thought he was strong enough, wise enough, powerful enough to match wills with the Dark Lord, to use the palantír without being dominated, to gather intelligence without being corrupted. He was wrong. Sauron had broken him, over years, over countless interactions through the seeing stones, pressing against Saruman's will, making arguments, making offers, making promises, until Saruman convinced himself, rationalized, believed, that serving Sauron was wisdom, that opposing him was folly, that the only rational choice was to join the winning side while there was still time to profit from it. That's what the palantír did. That's what Sauron had made them do. Windows into domination. Tools that let him reach across vast distances and break people, corrupt them, turn them into servants. Anyone who looked into a seeing stone, anyone foolish enough to think they could match wills with a being who had existed for thousands of years, who had broken the wills of the mightiest warriors and wisest leaders Middle-earth had ever known. They all broke eventually. All of them. Elves wouldn't use the stones anymore. Knew better. Knew that Sauron had made them into traps. The dwarves didn't have any. And men. Men who looked into the palantír. They were dominated, broken, made into tools, every single one, until Aragorn. He took the stone from Orthanc, from Saruman's tower after it had fallen, after the wizard had been defeated at Helm's Deep, after everything Saruman had built had collapsed. The stone remained, waiting, dangerous, a trap for anyone foolish enough to use it. And Aragorn, knowing what it was, knowing what it could do, knowing that Sauron would see him, would try to dominate him, would press against his will with the weight of thousands of years of experience and power, knowing he could be broken, could be turned, could be made into another servant like Denethor and Saruman and everyone else who had ever tried to use the stones. He looked into it anyway, deliberately, intentionally, as a calculated risk, because Gandalf, the wizard who advised him, had suggested it, had argued that maybe, perhaps, if someone strong enough, someone with the right lineage, someone with the will and the heritage and the authority, maybe they could claim the stone, could resist Sauron's domination, could turn the palantír into a weapon, not of spying, but of deception, of making Sauron see something, believe something, that would make him make mistakes. It was a gamble, an incredibly dangerous gamble, if Aragorn failed, if he couldn't resist, if Sauron dominated him. Then the West would lose one of its greatest leaders, its best commander, the heir of Isildur, the man who could potentially unite the free peoples. Gone, broken, made into another servant of darkness. But if it worked, if Aragorn could resist, could claim the stone, could show Sauron something that would make him afraid, make him panic, make him react instead of plan, then maybe, just maybe, they could create the opening they needed, the mistake, the error, the moment of weakness that would let the real plan, the real quest, the real attack, succeed. So Aragorn looked, held the stone, opened himself to it, to the vision, to the connection, to Sauron's presence, pressing against him from across the distance, from Barad-dûr, from the dark tower where Sauron sat, watching, waiting, ready to break another fool who thought they could use his tools. And the battle began. Not with swords, not with armies, not with anything visible, but with wills, with spirits, with the clash of two beings, two powers, fighting for dominance of the Seeing Stone, for control, for victory, Aragorn told me later, years later, after everything, after he was king, after the war was won, after he had time to reflect on what he had done, what he had risked, what it had cost him. He described that confrontation, that battle, that hours-long struggle in the palantír. It wasn't like physical combat, wasn't like fighting with weapons or strength. It was. He struggled to find words, struggled to explain what it felt like to have Sauron's will pressing against yours, trying to break you, to dominate you, to remake you into his servant. Like drowning, he said, but in thought, in will, in yourself, like being pulled under by a current stronger than anything natural, anything physical, like having your mind, yourself, your identity, everything that made you who you were, crushed, pressed, squeezed by a force so overwhelming that resistance seemed absurd, impossible, pointless. Sauron didn't argue, didn't try to convince, didn't need to. He just was. His presence, his certainty, his absolute conviction that you would break, that you would serve, that resistance was temporary, that everyone broke eventually, everyone, without exception, and you felt it. Felt the weight of thousands of years, thousands of victories, thousands of broken wills and dominated minds and servants who had thought they were strong enough, wise enough, different enough to resist, and hadn't been able to, because Sauron was patient, was certain, was inevitable. Aragorn had held on, for hours, his body rigid, his hands clenched on the stone, his face aged, strained, struggling against something invisible, against a battle no one else could see, against a force that was killing him slowly, breaking him piece by piece, making him understand, making him know that he couldn't win, couldn't resist, couldn't hold on forever. But he didn't need forever. He just needed long enough to show Sauron something. One thing, one image, one truth that would make everything else possible. The sword. Andúril. The sword that had been Narsil. The blade that had been carried by Elendil, king of Gondor and Arnor. The man who had stood against Sauron 3,000 years ago, who had fought him, who had fallen, but whose son, Isildur, had taken up the broken sword, had cut the ring from Sauron's hand, had defeated him, had ended the Second Age, had sent Sauron's spirit fleeing, broken, defeated, humiliated. That sword, the weapon Sauron remembered, the blade that had touched him, that had hurt him, that had taken everything, the ring, his power, his body, his victory, everything he had built, everything he had planned, cut away in one moment, one strike, one defeat that had haunted him for 3,000 years. The sword had broken, shattered when Isildur fell, when the ring betrayed him, when orcs killed him in the Gladden fields. The blade split into shards, carried away by Isildur's son, kept as an heirloom, as a reminder, as a promise, that one day, maybe, perhaps, the line of kings would return, would reclaim their throne, would stand against darkness again. But that day had never come. Isildur's line had faded, had become rangers, wanderers, men without kingdoms, without power, without the strength to reclaim what had been lost. The sword remained broken, a symbol of defeat as much as victory, of a bloodline that had failed, that had lost the ring, that had let Sauron survive, rebuild, return, until Rivendell, until Elrond, until the elves took the shards and reforged them, melted the ancient metal and remade it. Andúril, flame of the west, the sword whole again, sharp again, ready again, carried now by Aragorn, Isildur's heir, the last of the line, the man who claimed, who believed, who knew that he was the king, that the bloodline lived, that the promise would be fulfilled. And Aragorn showed Sauron that sword, held it up, let the light catch it, let Sauron see it through the palantír, see that it was whole, that it was real, that the blade that had defeated him once, that had cut the ring from his hand, that had ended his body, that had sent him fleeing, that had cost him everything, it was back, and it was carried by Isildur's heir, by the man who had every right, every claim, every legitimacy, to wield it, to use it, to do what his ancestor had done, cut the ring away, defeat Sauron, end him and Sauron. Seeing this, seeing the sword, seeing the heir, seeing them together, drew the conclusion that Aragorn wanted him to draw. The logical conclusion, the only conclusion that made sense, that explained why Aragorn would dare, would risk, would challenge him through the palantír, would show him that sword, would claim the Seeing Stone by right of Elendil's line. Aragorn had the ring, had to have the ring. Why else would he be so bold? Why else would he reveal himself? Why else would he think he could resist Sauron's domination? Unless he had the ring, unless he believed he could master it, unless he was preparing, planning, getting ready to use it, to become a ring lord himself, to challenge Sauron with the very weapon Sauron had forged, the power Sauron had created, turned against him by the heir of the man who had defeated him before. That's what Sauron believed. That's what Aragorn made him believe. By showing him the sword, by revealing himself, by fighting in the palantír, by proving he had the will, the strength, the power to resist domination, to claim the stone, to stand as Sauron's equal, or enemy, or rival, and by making Sauron believe that, by planting that fear, that terror, That absolute conviction that the ring was with Aragorn, that the heir of Isildur had the weapon that could overthrow him, that history was repeating, that he was about to lose, again, in the same way, to the same bloodline, with the same sword. Aragorn made Sauron panic, made him afraid, made him abandon everything, all strategy, all patience, all the careful planning that had served him for millennia, made him react, made him make mistakes, made him focus on the wrong threat, while the real ring-bearer, the real quest, the real danger, approached from a direction Sauron never watched, because he was too busy panicking, too consumed by fear, too certain that Aragorn was coming for him. But I didn't know any of this. Not that night. Not when it happened. Not when Sauron looked into the palantír and everything changed. I just knew, felt, sensed, that something had gone terribly wrong, that something had shaken the Dark Lord in a way I had never imagined possible. It started normally. Routine. Just another day in Borad-dûr. Another day of managing the war machine, of coordinating supplies and troop movements, and the 1,000 details that kept Mordor's armies functioning. Sauron often used the palantír, would spend hours consulting them, checking on his servants, his forces, his plans, making sure everything proceeded according to design, according to the careful choreography he had planned. I was in the throne room that evening, reporting on logistics, on the supplies being sent to the armies besieging Minas Tirith, on the reinforcements being prepared, on the fleets being built in the south, everything proceeding smoothly, everything according to plan. The west was weakening, Gondor isolated, Rohan struggling, the elves leaving, everything falling into place exactly as Sauron had foreseen. The Fellowship was broken. We knew that. Had reports of the attack at Amon-Hen, Boromir dead, the hobbits captured by orcs, though the orcs had been slaughtered by Rohirrim before they could deliver their prisoners. Annoying, but not critical. The ring was still lost somewhere, still hidden, still unable to threaten us, not while it remained unfound, not while no one knew where it was, not while the ring-bearer, whoever that was, remained scattered, alone, hunted. Sauron listened to my report, as he always did, patient, attentive, his presence overwhelming but controlled. He asked questions about supply routes, about troop morale, about production in the forges, all the practical details that determined whether campaigns succeeded or failed. He was thorough, as always, missing nothing, planning for everything, making certain that when the final stroke came, when he was ready to crush the West completely, nothing would be left to chance. "Leave me," he said finally. His voice, that strange quality that was neither quite sound nor quite thought, something that resonated in your mind. "I will consult the stones. Saruman's silence troubles me. I would know what has befallen Isengard, whether the wizard still follows our design, whether adjustments are needed." I bowed, left, thought nothing of it. This was normal, routine, Sauron checking on his servants, making sure his plans remained on course. I had seen him do this hundreds of times, thousands. It was part of how he operated. Constant monitoring, constant adjustment, constant control over every piece, every plan, every servant. I went about my duties, checked the guard rotations, the supply trains, the forges where weapons were being made day and night, the slave pens where prisoners worked until they died, the training grounds where new orcs were being drilled, the mundane, endless, grinding work of maintaining an empire, of keeping a war machine functioning, of serving the Dark Lord's vision of inevitable conquest. I expected to be called back within an hour or two, expected Sauron to have finished his consultation, to have new orders, new adjustments to the plan, the normal flow of command, of service, of the machine continuing its work. But hours passed. 3 hours. 4. 5. No summons, no word. The throne room remained sealed. Guards posted outside. Orders not to disturb. Sauron still inside. Still consulting the palantír. Still doing whatever he was doing. Longer than usual. Much longer. But not unprecedented. Sometimes these consultations took time. Sometimes he would observe, watch, wait for the right moment to act, to give new orders, to adjust plans. I finished my duties, went to sleep, expected everything to be normal in the morning, expected to wake up to new orders, to the next phase of the plan, to the machine continuing its grinding, inevitable progress toward victory. But when I woke, when I returned to the throne room, when I came to receive my orders for the day, the doors were still sealed, still guarded, still closed. Sauron still inside, alone with the palantír, for over 14 hours now. That was wrong. That was unprecedented. That was concerning, troubling, frightening in a way I couldn't quite articulate. Because Sauron didn't. He was always controlled, always measured, always precise. He didn't spend 14 hours doing anything. He was efficient, deliberate, every action calculated, every moment used productively. "Has he summoned anyone?" I asked the guards, trying to keep my voice calm, professional, not betraying the unease that was growing in my chest. "No one," the senior guard said, his face troubled, his stance tense. "He hasn't emerged, hasn't spoken, hasn't called for food or water or anything, just silence for 14 hours. And his presence?" I asked, because we could always feel Sauron, his will, his power. It filled the tower, pressed against your consciousness. You learned to live with it, to function despite it. But it was always there, always present, always certain, always controlled. "Wrong," the guard said quietly, looking around nervously, like saying it aloud made it more real, more dangerous. "It feels disturbed, like a storm, like something churning, building, like he's angry or afraid, or I don't know. But it's not right, not normal, not like him." I felt it too, now that he mentioned it, now that I paid attention. Sauron's presence, it was different, churning, agitated, like rage and fear mixed together, like something barely contained, like a volcano about to erupt, like violence held back by sheer force of will but threatening, promising to explode at any moment. And I understood, in that moment, that something had happened, something in that consultation with the palantír, something that had shaken Sauron, that had disturbed him, that had made the Dark Lord, the being who was always certain, always controlled, always patient, into something else, something driven by emotion, by urgency, by something I couldn't name, but that terrified me in a way nothing else ever had. Sauron was afraid. And if Sauron was afraid, if something had scared him, then we were all in danger. Because fear makes people do stupid things, makes them react instead of plan, makes them abandon strategy for desperation. And what would Sauron do? What would the Dark Lord become when he was desperate? I was about to find out. The doors opened. Finally. After nearly 15 hours, they swung wide, and Sauron emerged, and I knew, immediately, instantly, just from seeing him, from feeling his presence, from sensing the wrongness that radiated from him like heat from fire. Everything had changed. His presence, usually so controlled, so focused, so utterly dominant in a way that was overwhelming but stable, like standing before a mountain, immovable, eternal, certain. It was chaotic now, roiling, like a storm barely contained, like multiple emotions fighting for control, rage, fear, desperation, urgency, all mixed together, all pressing against everyone nearby, making it hard to think, hard to breathe, hard to do anything except feel the overwhelming wrongness of what was happening. He moved fast, not his usual measured pace, not the deliberate, patient movement that characterized everything he did. Fast, driven, purposeful in a way that spoke of urgency, of necessity, of something that couldn't wait, that demanded immediate action, that overrode everything else. "Assemble the War Council," he commanded. His voice, usually so measured, so controlled, so absolutely certain, now sharp, hard, edged with something I'd never heard before, something that made my blood run cold. Immediately, all commanders, all lieutenants, every captain of significance, every overseer of import. Now, within the hour. I will not wait longer. Move. The guards scattered. Messengers ran. Orders shouted through corridors. Urgency that infected everyone. That made us move faster, work harder, obey without question. Because if Sauron was urgent, if Sauron couldn't wait, if Sauron was driven by something this powerful, this overwhelming, this wrong, then something catastrophic had happened. Something that threatened everything. Something that demanded immediate response. Within 50 minutes, the War Council had assembled. Faster than we'd ever managed before. 53 of us. Every major commander in Barad-dûr. Every lieutenant who managed significant operations. Every captain who led armies or fleets or major fortifications. Every overseer who controlled forges or supply lines or slave populations. Everyone who mattered. Everyone who made decisions. Everyone who kept Mordor functioning. We gathered in the great war room beneath the throne chamber, a circular chamber with a map of Middle-earth carved into the floor, with markers showing our forces, enemy positions, supply routes, strategic objectives. I had been in this room hundreds of times, seen countless councils, watched strategies debated, plans refined, campaigns designed and approved and launched. It was always controlled, always measured, always methodical. Sauron would present a situation, explain the strategic landscape, ask for assessments from his commanders, listen to arguments, consider options, weigh risks against benefits, then decide, calmly, rationally, with the certainty of someone who had thought through every possibility, who saw 10 moves ahead, who understood consequences better than anyone else in the room. But when Sauron entered this time, when he strode into the war room, when his presence washed over us like a wave, like a physical force that made us step back, made us flinch, made us understand that everything we thought we knew, everything we had relied on, everything that had made us believe in inevitable victory, was gone, shattered, replaced by something else, by fear. We bowed, waited, tried not to show our own fear, our own uncertainty, our own growing conviction that something terrible had happened, that the world we knew, the certainty we served, the inevitability we believed in, had been shaken, threatened, maybe even broken. Sauron didn't wait for formalities, didn't follow his usual protocols, didn't give us time to settle, to prepare, to ready ourselves for whatever was coming. He just spoke, and his words, his tone, his entire bearing, it was wrong, all wrong, driven by something none of us had ever seen in him before. Terror. Isildur's heir lives, he said. Not calmly, not measured, not with the patient certainty that had characterized every statement he'd ever made. Sharp, tense, hard, like he was barely controlling himself, like rage and fear were fighting behind every word, like he was on the edge of losing control completely. The line of kings is not broken. Aragorn, son of Arathorn, chieftain of the Dunedain, the heir of Elendil. He has revealed himself. He has claimed the palantír of Orthanc. He has dominated the Seeing Stone. He has shown me the sword. The council stirred, uncertain, confused. We knew of Aragorn, had reports on him, a ranger, a wanderer, descended from the old kings. Yes, but insignificant. No army, no kingdom, no power base, no threat. Just another man in the wilderness. We had monitored him for years, tracked his movements occasionally, dismissed him as irrelevant, harmless, not worth significant attention. He was nothing, no one, just a remnant of a bloodline that had failed, that had faded, that had lost everything. But Sauron wasn't treating him like nothing, wasn't dismissing him, wasn't approaching this with his usual patient analysis, his usual weighing of threats and opportunities, his usual strategic assessment. He was treating Aragorn like the gravest threat we had ever faced, like an immediate danger, like something that required every resource, every force, every weapon, right now, without delay, without planning, without the careful preparation that had always characterized his campaigns. My lord, one of the senior commanders ventured, carefully, respectfully, trying to inject reason, trying to slow the panic we could all feel. Aragorn he's a ranger, a wanderer. He has no army, no kingdom, no resources. Yes, he's descended from Isildur. But that bloodline has failed, has been broken, he showed me Narsil. Sauron cut him off, voice rising, losing control, actually losing control in front of the entire War Council. Something I'd never seen, never imagined possible. Reforged, remade, Andúril, the flame of the West, the blade that cut the ring from my hand, the sword that ended me, that defeated me, that sent me fleeing, that cursed, that hated, that. He stopped, breathing hard. If he breathed, if his form required breath, he seemed to be struggling with something, fighting something, trying to regain control but failing, visibly failing in front of everyone. The sword is whole, he continued, voice lower now but no less intense, no less driven by something that overrode everything else. The blade that was broken, that was shattered, that I thought was gone, scattered, lost forever. It's whole, and he carries it. The heir carries it, shows it, claims his heritage, his right, his... Another pause, another struggle for control, the presence churning, building, like a storm about to break. He has the ring. The words hit like a physical blow, like the world ending, like everything we thought we knew, everything we believed, everything we had planned for, shattering into fragments. Silence, complete silence. No one moved, no one spoke. We just stared, trying to process, trying to understand, trying to reconcile what Sauron was saying with what we knew, with what intelligence told us, with what made sense. What? Someone asked. Finally, one of the commanders, brave or foolish. The ring? My lord. How? We have reports, intelligence from the Nine, from our scouts, from Saruman before he fell silent. The ring is with the halfling, with Frodo Baggins. We know where it went. We know. He must have it. Sauron's voice cracked like thunder, like the walls themselves were shaking. Why else would he dare? Why else would he reveal himself to me, challenge me through the palantír, dominate the Seeing Stone that is mine? Show me that sword, that cursed blade, unless he has the ring, unless he believes he can master it, unless he knows that he can use it against me, can claim its power, can become what? What? He couldn't finish, couldn't complete the thought, because the thought was too terrible, too overwhelming, too consuming to even say aloud. But we all understood. We all knew what he meant, what he feared, what had driven him into this panic, this terror, this complete abandonment of everything that made him dangerous. If Aragorn had the ring, if Isildur's heir possessed the One Ring, if the man carrying the sword that had cut it from Sauron's hand now held the ring itself, then Aragorn could master it, could claim it, could become a ring lord, a new power, a rival, someone with the blood of Númenor, the authority of the ancient kings, the sword of Elendil, and the ring of power, someone who could challenge Sauron, who could overthrow him, who could take his place, who could become everything Sauron feared most, a worthy opponent, an equal, a threat. "My lord," another commander said, trying desperately to inject reason, to slow this, to stop the panic before it consumed everything. "Perhaps we should verify, send scouts, gather more intelligence. If Aragorn truly has the ring, we need to know for certain. We need to confirm. We shouldn't. We can't make assumptions without—" "There is no time!" Sauron's presence flared, pressed against everyone in the room, made us step back, made us flinch, made us understand that questioning, doubting, suggesting caution. It wasn't allowed. Not now, not when Sauron was certain, when he knew, when he had seen. If he masters it, if he learns to wield it fully, if he claims it as his birthright, he will come for me. We'll raise the armies of the West. We'll forge them into a force that could, that might. We'll rally Gondor, Rohan, the elves if any remain, the dwarves, everyone against me, with the ring, with the sword, with the authority of Númenor's heir. He will be unstoppable, will overthrow me, will take everything. We must strike now, before he grows stronger, before he masters it. Then we hunt him, one of the military commanders said. Practical, direct. Send the 9, send assassins, find him, kill him, take the ring before he— No. Sauron's voice, absolute, final, brooking no argument. No, he revealed himself for a reason. He's ready, or believes he is. He's moving, planning, preparing to claim his throne, to rally the West, to come for me. We don't have time to hunt, to search, to hope we find him before he's ready. We must strike where we know he's going, where he must go, where his path leads inevitably. Where? I asked, my voice uncertain, still trying to understand, still trying to process what was happening, what Sauron was proposing, what this meant. Gondor, Sauron said. Certain. Absolute. Utterly convinced. And utterly wrong, but we didn't know that yet. Couldn't see it. Couldn't understand that we were watching the Dark Lord make the greatest mistake of his existence. Minas Tirith. The White City. His throne. His heritage. His birthright. He will go there. Must go there. Will claim the throne of Gondor. Will raise his banner. Will call the free peoples to war. Against me. With the ring. With the sword. With everything. We strike there. Now. Immediately. We crush Gondor before he arrives. Before he can claim his throne. Before he can rally them. Before— But our plan, someone interrupted. Desperately now. Trying to salvage something. Trying to restore the careful strategy we'd been building toward for months. For years. We were going to let winter weaken them. Let their supplies dwindle. Let Rohan fall first. Let them become desperate, divided, weak, then strike when victory was certain, when we couldn't lose, when— The plan is over, Sauron said. Final. absolute, crushing all dissent, all questioning, all doubt. Everything changes, all of it, every strategy, every timeline, every careful preparation, abandoned. We attack Minas Tirith, now, with everything, every force, every army, every weapon we possess. We crush them before Aragorn can unite them, before he can master the ring, before he becomes what he could become. We end this. We end him. Now. And I understood, watching him, listening to him, seeing the fear that drove every word, every decision, every order, seeing the complete abandonment of everything that had made Sauron dangerous, everything that had made him seem inevitable, everything that had made us believe his victory was certain. He was panicking, reacting, making rash decisions driven entirely by terror, by the belief, the absolute certainty, the overwhelming conviction that Aragorn had the ring, that Aragorn could master it, that Aragorn was coming for him, and that if we didn't strike immediately, if we didn't crush him now, before he grew stronger, we would lose. Sauron was making a mistake, the greatest mistake of his existence, and we couldn't stop him, couldn't question, couldn't save him from himself, because his fear, his panic, his absolute conviction, it crushed all doubt, made questioning impossible, made us believe, made us obey, even though everything in me, everything I had learned in 40 years of serving him, everything I knew about strategy and patience and careful planning, all of it screamed that this was wrong, that we were making a terrible error, that Sauron's fear was leading us into disaster. But I didn't voice it, didn't question, didn't dare, because Sauron was certain, and Sauron was never wrong, was he? The orders went out within the hour, every careful plan, every measured preparation, every strategy we had been building toward for months, for years, thrown aside, abandoned, replaced with one singular desperate imperative. Attack Minas Tirith, now. Destroy Gondor. Kill Aragorn. Stop him before he masters the ring. I watched it happen, watched the carefully constructed machinery of war that Sauron had built over decades. That moved with precision, with coordination, with the deliberate patience that made victory inevitable. I watched it all thrown into chaos, into rushed mobilization, into desperate urgency that made no strategic sense. Forces that were supposed to move in stages, in careful coordination, in waves that would overwhelm through systematic pressure, all of them thrown forward at once. The siege weapons rushed, the supplies hastily gathered, the reinforcements pushed ahead of schedule. Everything, all at once, driven by the absolute necessity of striking now, before Aragorn arrived, before he claimed his throne, before he rallied the West with the ring and the sword and the authority of Númenor's heir. The commanders tried to object, tried to point out the risks, the supply problems, the coordination issues, the fact that rushing like this, moving without proper preparation, it created vulnerabilities, opportunities for the enemy, chances for things to go wrong. Sauron crushed every objection, every question, every doubt, with the absolute certainty of his fear, with the overwhelming conviction that delay meant defeat, that hesitation meant giving Aragorn time to master the ring, that patience, the very thing that had always served him, that had made him dangerous, that had made him seem unstoppable, was now the enemy, was now the threat, was now the thing that would destroy him if he allowed it. So we rushed. We threw everything at Minas Tirith, the full might of Mordor, committed to one target, one city, one desperate gambit to kill the man Sauron believed carried the ring before he could use it, before he could become what Sauron feared he would become, a rival, a threat, an equal. I remained in Barad-dûr, coordinating the supplies, managing the logistics, watching from a distance as our forces besieged the White City. As the battle unfolded exactly as Sauron had predicted, the city holding longer than it should, stronger than expected. But we kept pressing, kept attacking, kept throwing forces at those white walls, because Aragorn was inside. He had to be inside. Sauron was certain of it, absolutely certain. Reports came back, the siege intensifying, the walls breached, the city burning, the defenses crumbling. Victory seemed close, inevitable. Just a matter of time before we broke through completely. Before we found Aragorn, before we took the ring, before we ended the threat. And then, days into the siege. A report came that made no sense. A report that should have made Sauron pause, should have made him question, should have made him wonder if, maybe, perhaps. His certainty was wrong. Aragorn wasn't in Minas Tirith. He had never been in Minas Tirith. He was marching toward the Black Gate, toward Mordor, toward us, with an army, a small army, pitiful really, maybe 10,000 men, against all the forces of Mordor, against hundreds of thousands of orcs and men and creatures, against overwhelming odds, marching straight toward the Dark Tower, toward Sauron himself. I expected Sauron to realize, to understand, to see that something was wrong, that his assumptions might be incorrect, that maybe, just maybe, Aragorn didn't have the ring, that this was something else, some other plan, some other strategy. But he didn't. Instead, he saw it as confirmation, as vindication, as proof that he had been right all along. "He's coming," Sauron said when he heard the news. His presence, his voice, triumphant now, eager, certain that victory was at hand. He believes he can challenge me directly, believes the ring makes him strong enough, arrogant, foolish, perfect. He's bringing it to me, offering himself, the ring, everything. We don't have to hunt, don't have to search. He's coming to us. "What do we do?" I asked, though I already knew, already understood where this was going, already saw the trap closing, though I didn't know yet that we were the ones being trapped, that Sauron was the one being deceived, that everything we thought we knew was wrong. "We meet him," Sauron said, his certainty absolute, his conviction unshakable, his fear transformed into eagerness, into the anticipation of victory, of ending the threat, of taking the ring. "We bring every force, every army, everything we have in Mordor. We assemble at the Black Gate. We crush his pathetic army. We take the ring from his corpse. We end this. Finally. Completely. We win. More orders. More mobilization. Every force in Mordor. Every orc garrison. Every guard post. Every fortress. Every defensive position. All of them. Stripped. Emptied. Abandoned. All sent to the Black Gate. To face Aragorn. To crush his army. To take the ring. Every reserve. Every backup. Every contingency. Gone. Committed. Thrown at one target. One man. One army that seemed insignificant. Suicidal. Foolish beyond measure. 10,000 men marching against Mordor. It was absurd. It was madness. It was perfect. But we didn't see it. Didn't understand. Didn't realize what was happening. What Aragorn had done. What his gamble had achieved. He had made Sauron panic. Had made him see the threat Aragorn wanted him to see. Had made him commit everything. Focus everything. Strip every defense. Abandon every precaution. All to face the man who had shown him the sword. Who had claimed the palantír. Who Sauron believed carried the ring. While the real ring-bearer, the real threat, the real attack, approached from a direction we had left unguarded, undefended, unwatched, because every eye was on the Black Gate. Every force was facing Aragorn, every guard, every scout, every watcher. All of them pulled away, committed elsewhere, focused on the wrong enemy. I watched the armies march, watched the Black Gate open, watched our forces pour out, hundreds of thousands of them, surrounding the pitiful force that Aragorn had brought. That stood there, defiant, doomed, about to be crushed, about to give us everything. The ring, the victory, the end of the last real threat to Sauron's dominion. Sauron's presence, his will, his entire being, focused on that moment, on that army, on Aragorn standing at their head, the sword visible even from Barad-dûr, Andúril, gleaming, a beacon, a challenge, a threat about to be ended. I could feel Sauron's anticipation, his certainty, his absolute conviction that this was it, that victory was moments away, that soon, very soon, the ring would be his again, the threat eliminated, the West broken, everything proceeding, finally, to the inevitable conclusion he had always foreseen. And then, in that moment, when every eye was on the Black Gate, when every force was committed, when Sauron's entire attention, his entire will, his entire existence was focused on Aragorn and the ring he believed Aragorn carried, Mount Doom erupted, the earth shook, the sky split, fire and ash and devastation, and I felt it. We all felt it. The ring. The one ring. Not at the Black Gate. Not with Aragorn, not anywhere near where Sauron had thought, had believed, had been absolutely certain it was, in the fires of Mount Doom, where it had been forged, where it could be destroyed, where it was, being destroyed. I watched, felt, sensed Sauron's presence, his will, his certainty collapse, like a tower falling, like a mountain crumbling, like everything he was, everything he had been, everything he had built, shattering, breaking, dissolving into nothing. And in that moment, that terrible, crushing, devastating moment, I understood, finally, completely, what had happened, what Aragorn had done, what his gamble had achieved. There was no ring lord. Aragorn didn't have the ring, had never had the ring, had never claimed it, had never intended to use it. He had shown Sauron the sword, had let Sauron draw his own conclusions, had let him believe, had let him panic, had let him make mistake after mistake, all driven by fear, by assumptions, by the absolute conviction that history was repeating, that the heir of Isildur with the sword of Elendil must have the ring, must be the threat, must be stopped immediately, at any cost, with any sacrifice, while the real ring-bearer, a hobbit, small, insignificant, unnoticed, unimportant, the last person Sauron would ever suspect, the last threat he would ever watch for, walked into Mordor, through defenses that had been stripped, past guard posts that had been emptied, through territory that should have been impenetrable, should have been watched, should have been defended, but wasn't. Because every guard, every soldier, every orc, every watcher, every defensive position, all of them, all of it, was at the Black Gate, fighting Aragorn's diversion, falling for the trick, the gamble, the dangerous risk that had worked beyond anyone's wildest imagination. Aragorn had made Sauron panic, had made him afraid, had made him believe something that wasn't true, had made him abandon everything, all strategy, all patience, all the careful planning and measured approach that had made him dangerous, made him successful, made him seem inevitable. And that panic, that fear, that mistake had given Frodo Baggins, the real ring-bearer, the real hero, the real threat, everything he needed, an undefended path, an unguarded mountain, an opportunity that should never have existed, that wouldn't have existed if Sauron had been patient, if he had waited, if he had verified, if he had thought instead of reacted, if he had planned instead of panicked. But he didn't, because Aragorn had made him afraid. And fear makes you stupid. Fear makes you see threats that aren't there. Fear makes you believe things that aren't true. Fear makes you abandon everything that makes you strong, everything that makes you successful, everything that makes you dangerous, for the desperate, futile, doomed attempt to destroy the threat you believe in, while the real threat, the real danger, the real end, approaches from a direction you never watched, never guarded, never considered, because you were too afraid, too panicked, too certain to see it coming. The Dark Tower fell. Barad-dûr, the fortress that had stood for thousands of years, the symbol of Sauron's power, his dominion, his inevitable victory, it crumbled, collapsed, fell into ruin as the ring burned, as Sauron's power, his will, his very existence, dissolved into nothing, into less than nothing, into the void where defeated Maiar go when they've been diminished beyond recovery. I fled, like thousands of others, ran from the collapsing tower, from the armies that broke, that scattered, that fled in every direction, from everything that had been Mordor, everything that had been Sauron's empire, everything we had built, everything we had believed in, crumbling, ending, gone. And I understood, with a clarity that burned worse than any fire, what I had witnessed, what Aragorn had done, what Sauron's fear had cost him, everything. I live quietly now, in a small village on Gondor's borders, where Aragorn, King Elisar, rules with wisdom and justice and mercy beyond anything I deserve. He knows what I was, what I did. 40 years in Sauron's service. 40 years of enabling evil, of making the war machine function, of serving the Dark Lord's vision of domination. He could have executed me, could have thrown me in prison, could have punished me in countless ways. I expected him to, expected to die, or worse, to spend the rest of my life paying for what I had done, what I had enabled, what I had been part of. But he didn't. He offered mercy instead, offered a chance to live, to rebuild, to become something other than what I had been. Because Aragorn, unlike Sauron, understands that people can change, can choose differently, can become something better than their past. And he understands something else, something that I think about every day, something that haunts me, something that I need others to understand. Because the lesson, the truth, the terrible wisdom of what happened, it's too important to let die with me. Fear is the greatest weapon, not armies, not power, not even the ring itself. Fear. Because fear makes you stupid, makes you react instead of plan, makes you see threats that aren't there, makes you believe things that aren't true, makes you abandon everything that makes you strong, everything that makes you dangerous, everything that makes you successful, for the desperate attempt to destroy the threat you believe in, while the real threat, the real danger, the real end, approaches unseen, unwatched, unopposed. That's what Aragorn did. He didn't defeat Sauron with power, with the ring, with armies or weapons or force. He defeated him with fear, with a bluff, with the courage to show Sauron something terrifying, and the wisdom to trust that Tyr would do the rest, would make Sauron make mistakes, would make him panic, would make him destroy himself, by showing him a sword, by claiming a palantír, by revealing himself as Isildur's heir, by making Sauron believe, absolutely believe, that the past had come back, that history was repeating, that he was about to lose, again, in the same way, to to the same bloodline, with the same weapon, and Sauron, the great deceiver, the master of manipulation, the being who had corrupted kingdoms and dominated kings for thousands of years. He believed it, fell for it, let his fear control him, let his panic drive him, let his terror make him abandon everything he knew, everything that had made him successful, everything that had made him dangerous, and he destroyed himself, more completely, more thoroughly, more totally than any army could have, than any weapon could have, than any power in Middle-earth could have achieved, because Aragorn made him afraid, and that fear cost him everything. That's what I witnessed, that's what I learned. That's what I need you to understand. If you ever face great evil, if you ever confront power that seems overwhelming, darkness that seems unstoppable, enemies that seem invincible, remember this. Even the Dark Lord can panic. Even Sauron can be made afraid. Even the greatest power in Middle-earth can be defeated. Not by matching it. Not by overpowering it. Not by becoming what it is. But by making it afraid. By making it react. By making it see threats that aren't there. By making it abandon everything that makes it strong, for the desperate attempt to destroy the enemy it believes in, while the real attack, the real threat, the real danger, approaches from a direction it never watched. That was Aragorn's genius. That was his victory. That was how one man, with one sword, with one moment of incredible courage and breathtaking risk, changed everything, saved everything, won everything, by making Sauron panic, by making him afraid, by trusting that fear, that panic, that terror, would make the Dark Lord destroy himself, and it did. Better than anyone could have hoped, better than anyone could have planned, better than anyone could have dreamed, because Sauron, the master of deception, was deceived by his own fear, by his own assumptions, by his own panic, by the terror that made him see what wasn't there, believe what wasn't true, react when he should have planned, panic when he should have been patient. And that single mistake, that one moment of fear overriding wisdom, that one panic-driven decision to abandon everything, to commit everything, to focus everything on the wrong enemy at the wrong time in the wrong place. It cost him the world. That's the lesson. That's the truth. That's what I witnessed in 40 years of serving the Dark Lord. In 40 years of watching him plan and scheme and wait with infinite patience for the right moment to strike. In 40 years of believing he was inevitable, unstoppable, certain to win. I learned that fear destroys everything, even certainty, even patience, even the Dark Lord himself. And one man, Aragorn, son of Arathorn, heir of Isildur, King Elisar, he understood that, used that, weaponized that, and saved Middle-earth by showing Sauron a sword and letting his fear do the rest. If you want to hear more tales from the darkness of Middle-earth, stories of those who faced impossible odds and found unexpected ways to resist, to survive, to overcome, please subscribe to Whispers from the Past. There are countless stories still to tell, countless lessons from the shadows, countless truths about facing evil and finding the courage to stand against it. Subscribe and journey with us through the legends and the darkness of Tolkien's world.